when I thought about, am I going to advertise or am I not going to advertise? I said to myself, in what business would you start a new business and then not tell anybody what you're doing? And then I heard somebody else say, they're like, if you don't go advertise, then these other crappy lawyers that are advertising are going to be who everyone hires.
You see the same slogan everywhere. You drive, you see the billboards, says injured, question mark in all caps. But like what really stood out of your firm is a brand and which stop being polite and get rude. It's sticky. So like where did it come from?
I know what I did when I talked to people like you across a Zoom, and I'd say, Martin, are you tired of getting pushed around by insurance companies? And people would look at me sideways, and I'd say, you got to stop being polite and get rude.
Let's get started. Are you tired of getting pushed around? Well, so was Lee Rudin. He was tired of being told what he could and could not do as a lawyer and business developer. So he stopped working for other firms and started working for himself. In June 2023, Lee launched Rudin Law, a personal injury law firm based in New Orleans. His bold, aggressive, get rude brand makes his position unmistakable. If you've been hurt and are tired of getting pushed around by insurance companies, you've got to stop being polite and get rude. Welcome to Podcast Lee. So excited to have you on today.
You nailed it, Martin. I couldn't have written that better myself.
Fantastic. So let's talk a bit about your personal journey. You worked at a defense firm. You then built a plaintiff sub-practice inside someone else's firm. Most people would have stayed there for stability, but something wasn't right. Like, what's the story behind leaving your insurance defense company and launching your own plaintiff practice?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? A lot of people get complacent. They're happy, with the stability. I was happy at the firm that I was at. I had a lot of friends there. I enjoyed the work I was doing for the most part. I was, as busy as I wanted to be. But yeah, that firm made me what I call the offer I had to refuse because, part of the thing that I love about this business is getting the client, right? I love the sales side of the business, the marketing side of the business. And so when my old firm told me, hey, Lee, like we want to limit the amount of clients, the kind of clients you can bring in, that didn't sit right with me. In their mind, they wanted me to bring in bigger clients. And, my thought was, you don't get to just pick that you get the big clients. What happens is you help all the clients, and the little client leads you to the big client. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. If it was so easy to go get all the big clients, then you wouldn't see everybody advertising the way that they do for the big ones, right? Because they would just be falling from the trees. But that's not a reality. So that was kind of the beginning, the end of that journey, and then of what allowed me to launch my firm now.
And I remember seeing a post as well that you made on LinkedIn about securing, I believe, like a $250 or like $300 case, and that ultimately potentially turned into 3 huge cases. I guess that's the perfect example of what you're saying here, right?
It is. And it's funny you say that because I haven't released the follow-up post, which is, oh yeah, remember that client that I decided to help out on the $200 case that was going to lead to the bigger cases? Well, he didn't like that I told him the truth about one of those 2 cases and has since fired us. But that's okay. We'll make our fee for the work that we did. And I hope that he does well. And I hope that the firm that took over his case does better for him than he thought we could do. But sometimes our job is to counsel clients. And that doesn't mean be yes men or yes women. It means tell them the truth, tell them what we think based upon our experience, and they don't have to like it. That's the whole thing about this brand is that you don't have to like what we're saying. You don't have to like what we're doing. But we don't like what you're doing either. And we don't have to take it. And that's the whole point. And it goes across all platforms, all walks of life. I joke my daughter's in an elementary school and their motto is be kind. And I told my wife every time she asked me, do I want to sponsor the thing? I said, sure, as long as I can make merch that says be kind, get rude. And I just envisioned the conversation with the principal, and she's like, well, they can't get rude. I'm like, well, don't you want my 6-year-old daughter or these other kids to stand up for themselves? And when someone's giving them shit and they don't want to take it, shouldn't they get up and get rude and stop being polite? And she's not going to have a response to that because she knows I'm right.
Well, talking about getting rude, you see the same slogan everywhere you drive. You see the billboards, says injured question mark in all caps. But like what really stood out about your firm is the branding, which stop being polite and get rude. It's sticky. So like, where did it come from?
So I've tried to kind of recreate in my mind, how do I think this came to be? And I'll do this occasionally on things and I'll realize like, what was the daisy chain that got me to this? Now I know how I spitballed it. I know what I did when I talked to people like you across a Zoom. And I'd say, Martin, are you tired of getting pushed around by insurance companies? And people would look at me sideways and I'd say, you got to stop being polite and get rude, and they'd chuckle and they'd smile, and I'd say, okay, I think it's going to be sticky. But I think where it came from, the cadence of it. Back in the '90s, there was a show on MTV called The Real World, and I think they said something like they stop acting polite and start getting real, something like that. And I think that I just took that, modified it, cleaned it up, tightened it, because you don't want to have all that extra language. You want it to be punchy. And so stop being polite, get rude. It's 5 words. I can put injured, stop being polite, get rude, and I'll meet the 7 word on a billboard rule, right? I got it. I'm covered. So anyway, that's how I think it came to be in my subconscious.
No, I love that, and it takes I guess like a personality and a character to be able to confidently position your brand like this. Same as with just like starting your own practice. Like, where do you think that I guess like internal fire is coming from, and that's ability to defy I guess like the industry standard.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, this is kind of who I am, right? I'm not saying that I'm like the contrarian or the anarchist, burn the world down like that. Not exactly, but I've always been somebody, even from when I was a little kid, if I thought something was wrong, I would never stand on the sideline and just let it be that way. I'd always speak up. I remember being camp counselor, and I was always ended up being the spokesperson when something was going wrong for all the rest. And it's not always, it doesn't always put you in the best position, but what's the worst that happens? If you speak up, maybe you affect some change. If you don't, you know where you are now. And if that's untenable, like why just be in that position? So I think that's my mentality with the firm is if I do the same thing as everybody else, I have to pray that I'll maybe do okay. If you be different, what's the worst that happens? Maybe people are going to love it. Maybe the sky's the limit. Because if you do nothing, you just get, you'll be trekking along and maybe you'll make your money, maybe you won't. But I'm trying to make sure we're successful and I got a lot of people to support on my team and, I got a family at home. So we're going to just do the best we can in the boldest way we can.
And do you think that more attorneys, more law firm owners should adopt that mentality?
Yeah, and I don't think it has to be my way. Meaning, you can be bold without being aggressive and blunt and rude, right? You can be bold in a different way. You can be so boldly conservative or boldly boring, right? But it's so bold. On the other end, there's a guy I think out of Buffalo, and like that's his whole thing. He's I think it's William Matar, and it's like you get hit by a car, call Matar, and he's just so plain, but his plainness is his uniqueness. He leans into that like nerdy persona. And so the point is like figure out who you are. If you don't know who you are, why is anyone else going to want to gravitate towards you? And I think that you look at these great brands and these great personas, and they're people that are, unabashedly comfortable with who they are, and they don't give a shit. If you like it, that's who they are. And that's how I feel about myself. Like you can't give a shit.
Right. It's I think also another question is like figuring out truly what I guess what do you stand for, right? Is like how to make the determination for somebody. Let's say, imagine now that somebody is just leaving law school. How how would you recommend them going about finding their edge? Be that being extremely plain or being getting rude, you know?
Yeah. Well, I heard this advice from somebody recently, and I thought it was pretty sharp and clever. Ask other people, hey, what is it about me that's different, that's unique? Like what causes you to gravitate towards me? And for us, you can ask that question anonymously to a client, for example, or a potential client. Hey, why did you call us? When I hear people say, "Oh, I wanted to get rude," like I'm mad, I want them to get rude. I'm like, okay, that is the predictable rationale, right? That's why we think the brand's going to work, is because people are so mad at the way they're treated by insurance companies or corporate clients or whatever that they want someone to fight back. And getting rude is how they interpret it. But it could be whatever somebody feels is authentic to them. And again, if you don't know that, it's really hard to figure it out. But that's a necessary step if you want to create something that is going to position you in a unique way in a loud, crowded market.
I almost feel like it helps both ways. It helps both attracting clients, but then also attracting talent that resonates with that messaging, right? Because you almost end up having, I guess, like a similar kind of profile that thinks in the same way. If you state your position very clearly, which then helps you make sure that both your clients and your team are a culture fit.
Yeah. Look, I guarantee you there are folks that will never call me. They're not going to call me because of the brand. They're not going to call me for my style when I'm on video. They're not going to call me because they don't like advertising lawyers in general. Like, that's okay. When you run statistics and you find out that the largest personal injury firm in the country doesn't even have 50% of its own backyard's market share, that tells you there's a lot of opportunity to help people. Even if you're the 800-pound gorilla, there's opportunity to continue to grow. So when you're starting out, you're small like me, and you're trying to be, shifty, you just need to accumulate more people, help more people, help more people, help more people, and you'll grow. And you don't have to have all of it. You just have to have enough. And our goal is trying to figure out who wants our help and can we help them. And as long as there's that overlap, let's do it.
Talking about having enough, let's touch a bit more on the sales and intake side of things. You recently spoke at BeamCon, and I see that your posts are doing great on LinkedIn. You're active on social media in general. Your phone must be ringing nonstop. Was there ever a moment when you thought like I need to slow down, and reduce the number of leads I'm taking on, number of new clients I'm taking on?
Well, the answer is no, in the sense that it was never I need to slow down and stop the phone ringing or stop the clients coming in, because I think that's the worst thing you can do as a business. I'm not saying it's not a necessary evil sometimes, but I think the better solution is make sure your systems are where they need to be and go staff up. Because the second you stop the phones ringing, what if you stop them for good? Or what if you can't reverse it? And I'm going to kind of pivot slightly, but when I thought about, am I going to advertise or am I not going to advertise? I said to myself, in what business would you start a new business and then not tell anybody what you're doing? And then I heard somebody else say, they're like, if you don't go advertise, then these other crappy lawyers that are advertising are going to be who everyone hires. So if you're good, you should be out there shouting from the rooftops how good you are so that you can give you can give the help to clients that deserve it, as opposed to them hiring some hack just because that hack is on TV or on the radio telling them they should hire him. So, I think in many respects, I don't ever want the phone to stop ringing. Maybe we become more discerning about what kind of cases we take, but we're in a growth phase and we're young as a firm. And so we want to just try to help as many people as we can, as long as it fits within the confines of the work we're comfortable with. And then, if we can't help somebody, my messaging to my team is let's try to find them someone that can help them, even if it's just passing them on to the schools, the clinics, the bar association, so that they can get help if they need it.
It's almost our duty as business owners to, as you said, is to advertise as much as possible to make sure that our service is known, and even if we cannot help them, at least we can point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I
And it's exhausting and financially strenuous, right? But there's a delicate dance to do there. But again, if you're doing good work, you should want to tell people about it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, how have you been managing all of those incoming leads? Let's talk a bit more about your systems that you have in place in terms of
Sure.
operations and tech. What do you have in place to sustain that growth?
So our tech stack at the moment, right? We're a Filevine firm. We have Lead Docket stacked on top of that, and then above that, we've got Domo Periscope, which is their dashboarding tool, which we are almost fully built out on, and really is a game changer. For the flaws of Lead Docket and its presentation, you can really elevate it using Domo. And so I added both those pieces concurrently. One got built out faster than the other, but they are in place along with Filevine to really give us that scoreboard and know where things are. So that's been really, really great. We use Ring Central as our phone system, and we're toying with an AI tool to serve as a pseudo receptionist, but also some backup to my intake team, nights and weekends. We're going to see how it goes. I am cautiously optimistic. And, it's another one of those things where what's the worst that happens? If they're making a phone call at 2 in the morning on a lead that just came in and I don't have somebody working, then at least I know someone's making an outbound call, speed to lead. Whereas otherwise it's waiting until 9, maybe 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning to make that call. Again, like what's the harm? And I know what happens if we do nothing or we keep things the way they are. So we're playing with that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, circling to the, I guess, like the case management, lead docket. What made you choose those tools? And almost like it seems like an endless discussion, which tool is best, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you make a determination as a business owner, uh, what tool to choose, and then like whether you should stick with it if you don't like something about it, or you want to switch to another software?
Well, let me answer the last question first. Once you go through an implementation and you move from system to system, you can see what a nightmare it is. So I'm not saying like stick with it if it's awful, but be very careful, before you get into a certain bed that it's where you want to lay because getting out of it can be very, very burdensome in time, in money, in stress, and so it's not pleasant. I started on a system that if you asked me its name right now, I would totally blank. And so, but I started on it because it was portrayed to me as being an all-in-one. Like I could run my billing, run my accounting through it. And then I realized I wasn't running my accounting through it the way I thought. And the tool wasn't as, I guess it didn't have as many features as Filevine. And I had spoken to a couple different plaintiff lawyers who were using Filevine. I met with Filevine several times and I realized I thought this was going to be a good fit. I love the tool. It has some components to it that I haven't seen anybody else roll out, and I don't know why. And I find it to be excellent. It's got some wonkiness on the back end, and I think their failings, which we've told them straight up, that their failings are that they don't necessarily have folks that understand plaintiff personal injury practice guiding clients. And so when these things get built out, they have vendors building them out that don't necessarily understand best practices of a plaintiff personal injury firm, and the blowback ends up on Filevine. So the best thing in the world would be for them to hire someone like me, or have someone like me consult other firms of my size and give them the roadmap. Here's how we built out our different sections. Here's the template we use. Here's why we do it this way. If this jives with what you're doing, then you should do it this way too, and you'll see how well the tool can function. Because what's the use of having a Ferrari if you're going to drive it like a Mazda Miata, right? The idea is know what the tool can do and then put it in a position to succeed. And that's where I think there's a gap between the end user, Filevine, and its implementation partners. But we've told them this, and we're happy to work, hand in glove with them if they want to take us up on our offer.
And I feel like that's very important part as well, just like for vendors to make sure that you do know the niche within which you operate. If you don't have a niche, then choose a niche, right? Because like I honestly, Like we have been sort of in all the practice areas before, but honestly, at this point in time, I can't even imagine
Well,
how we would go about doing that. You know.
Martin, here's the thing, right? Like, what does it take for a vendor to bring on a former, I'll say high level, but high performing operator from an injury firm? If you bring someone in that says, okay, this is how this should work, and then you go as the implementer or as the engineer, now go build it out on the back end. So when you're handing someone a product, you're saying, oh, I understand how you actually practice with it. And now I'm going to give you the tool to allow you to work that way. It would remove so many frustrations and so much friction.
100%, 100%. Let me pick your brain on something. You mentioned like a few of those extra features that Filevine has implemented that no other vendor has. Can you delve a bit more into what those are?
Yeah. And forgive me if I'm now talking, a couple years stale, but Filevine has associated with every file, all right? They call them projects. Let's say they're cases or whatever. Every individual file has a tracking email. And I had not seen this with any tool. Now I'm assuming a lot of them have it, but Filevine was the first one that I saw where every unique case has a tracking email, meaning if you dump that email into the copy line or the blind copy line of an actual email, it'll send that email into your file without having to hit three buttons and make sure it's attached and this and that. Because I was notoriously bad at my old firm with getting emails saved into the file the right way. And it slows you down. So the idea that something like this could be included and it wouldn't slow you down is, I thought was brilliant. Because with all these tools, the key is user adoption and somebody following systems because you have to have a good system, but then you have to have buy-in. And idiot proofing the tool, making it super easy for users to follow the rules, that's the key. So that was the thing that sold me.
Right, right. The essentially like the mail drop, right? Address.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, right, right. I think since then, like a few providers have included that, but I think a big issue with, I guess like that feature, like the implementation of that feature is how do you make sure? Maybe let's get into tactical, but still, let us geek out a bit. How do you make sure that that mail drop then stays within the conversation? Do you just include it just manually, then send each email that you get into that mail drop address, or do you try
Martin,
to do it in CC?
it drives me crazy, right? I pay attention to detail, right? If you included somebody as a carbon copy or a blind carbon copy on an email, I presume you want that person copied. So I'm going to reply all. When I send an email and I don't get the reply all, I'm like, either you intended not to do that, you're an idiot, or you're lazy, right? So it's one of those three things, and none of them are good solutions, right? Or good answers. So anyway, I do I know that it happens all the time? Yeah, people drop it off all the time. Or they look at it and they think that I'm copying my client, which again, if you scrutinize the email address, which has the name of the client, a million different numbers and letters, and then Filevine, that's clearly not the client's email address. Okay. But you're not paying attention and you didn't care enough to ask. So oftentimes they're replying. I'm putting it back in the email address, hitting reply all. I have in my signature block, our firm uses tracking emails. Please reply all, like highlighted in red, bolded, underlined. I I don't know what I can do. I'm trying to help.
Fair enough, fair enough. No, I think like that's where potential like custom automation would make sense is like for those solutions you can automatically just monitor the inbox and find the right tool. But there isn't
100%.
really the perfect solution for this. Like indeed, it's just like one of those problems that just will needs remains unsolved. I guess largely.
Martin, this is what I said when someone was asking me, about the brand. I said, you can spell Rudin wrong, right? Ruden, Rudin, Rubin. It's really hard to spell rude wrong. So I thought that owning Get Rude, having the getrude.com URL, having 833 Get Rude, I thought I was idiot proofing it because we live in a world where people they don't read, they don't think. You're just trying to help them get through their day and make sure they put left shoe on their left foot and their right shoe on their right foot. But here we are.
Well, it is what it is. It's just reality
That's
is
right.
life, I guess.
That's right.
You mentioned as well Periscope and analytics. We feel like as you are starting to scale your firm, analytics absolutely paramount to make good business decisions as a law firm business owner, right? It's like, hey, where do I invest my marketing dollars and which marketing campaign? Or like, hey, which of my staff are performing the best? What I can learn from them, how can I manage performance better? Can you describe how having those analytics and the scorecard is that you mentioned in place improved your practice?
Yeah. So this is still a work in progress for us, but the evolution of where we were in, let's say, Q1, Q2 of this year to now, Q4 has been stark. I It's valuable in so many ways, right? You talked about marketing, maybe not as much attribution as contribution. What's working. If you get super technical on having to attribute every single lead to every category, you're going to probably lose your mind, especially when you're on multi-channels of advertising, some of which are impossible to track, like your traditional stuff in many respects, especially when you have branded phone numbers and things like that. But if you're willing to, proceed somewhat in the gray and say, okay, I know what I can attribute, and the rest of it will attribute amorphously to these other categories, that can serve you well. But then the other part of it is, as an operator, being able to understand how much time is it going to take for a case to come in the door and then leave, right? Time on desk, cash flow, being able to predict that out. So then you can devote marketing dollars, knowing, hey, this is where the money is going to be. Or then you can staff up knowing, hey, this is where the money is going to be, because you want to make payroll every week, right? You want to cover your marketing budget. And ideally, you want to have something left over for yourself at the end of the year. So that's where the value is. And you can get, as granular as you want to understand certain metrics. But I think at the highest level, if you know what your cases are worth, how long they're on your desk, when you expect them to close, and what's generally working marketing wise, you can, operate your firm at its highest capacity.
No, absolutely. Otherwise, it's almost like flying blind, right? It's like
100%.
how can I make this decision if I don't have the data? So absolutely crucial. In
And
terms of
that gut
yeah,
feel, right? That's not how it goes.
well, I think the gut feel is important in certain circumstances, like for example, when you do the hiring, right? But you shouldn't be making marketing investment decisions based on gut feel, right? So
Sure.
it's learning when you apply those.
Right.
You mentioned AI and you try a receptionist AI solution. What role does AI play, if at all, in terms of service delivery and actual operations?
Yeah. So when I first started playing with AI and like started to really get into it in a meaningful way, I I described it like the secretary sitting outside of your office. If you give it bad instructions, you're probably going to get a bad product. Right. And so understanding that it's a tool that can be super effective, cost effective, efficient, and really can put out some great end product when guided. And that to me is the key. So, what we've tried to do is find places where it can be useful for us in being more efficient. And we're a plaintiff contingency fee firm. So, efficiency is huge. If I were on the defense side and I was still billing by the hour, well, I would be troubled by these tools that can review medical records in great volumes very quickly, or depositions in great volumes very quickly. And do they put out a perfect product? I can't say it's perfect, but it's damn close. And it's just as perfect as that human that would make mistakes. So your job as the lawyer or the boss is to make sure that those mistakes aren't fatal, because you're actually looking at it and not just filing something with hallucinations in it, for argument's sake. So
Exactly.
that's my thought.
If you could spill the beans out, what kind of AI tools are you using in your practice?
Yeah. So a friend of mine owns a company. He's a PI lawyer out of Baltimore, and his tool is called Law Pro AI. They are a medical chronological. Now they handle some billing as well. Summarization tool. It's a platform. It's I mean, it's very user friendly. I think the tool so far has been very effective, and I like the idea that it's specialized. I know a lot of firms are out there saying, "Hey, we have a one-stop shop tool," but that gives me pause because I want to know what you do exceptionally well. I don't want you to tell me you do everything well, because if I find the thing that you don't do well, it's going to poison my taste for the rest of it. And so I like that I have a tool that summarizes medicals, summarizes bills. I can, in effect, attach it to my files. I can put a static link in on all my files. So if I want to go see what's the medical chronology here, boom, hit the link. I'm kicked out to their portal. I see everything. It's got its own chat bot built in, so you can talk to it. You can ask it questions about the medicals. My friend actually gave me this tip. He said, dump in their defense expert's medical report, then ask questions about what that expert did wrong and what it didn't review. I was like, okay, that's brilliant. Now all of a sudden, like, you could be sitting in a deposition talking to the guy. He's saying one thing, you're talking to your tool, and it's spitting out responses. I haven't played with it in that capacity yet, but I'd love to see it, firing off while you're in the throes of it. So that's where we are on the medical side. Um, we don't really use it. We don't use any other specialized tools at the moment. We have our general tools, for word processing, and I have a team that's global. So many of my team members, English isn't their first language. And I said, guys, if you're not sure, if you don't know that it's perfect, and as long as there's no client confidential information in it, put that block of text into, you pick your tool of choice, Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, I don't care, and just clean it up. I just want it to look good going out. And I wish if I was in your shoes and I could speak Spanish as well as I spoke English and could be hired by a Spanish speaking law firm, I would be so jealous, but I would be told to do the same thing because it wouldn't be perfect. So
Fair
that's where
enough.
we are.
Right. You mentioned as well using base models, so like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. Like, what's your opinion on using those in your practice?
Oh, I think they're awesome. I mean, I wish I had more time to really explore them. I'm a Google guy. I'm an Android phone user, and I'm Google oriented. Our firm uses Gmail, so I lean towards Gemini. And I've always thought that Gemini had the Google universe behind it. So I thought that it would be a very effective tool. I toyed with ChatGPT and some of the other ones as well. They all seem to have areas where they're better than others. And then I've, talked to a bunch of different lawyers that tell me, hey, this is really great for writing, like blog post writing, things like that, because it's more specialized to writers. I think that figuring out what works best for the things you need it for, that's the way to go.
So, and the cool thing about as well Gemini, like we also, that's our primary recommendation as well to the firms we are working with. Like, the great thing is it is running on the same infrastructure that as Google Workspace, right? So if you upload in a file to Gmail, if you upload in a file to Google Drive, it's pretty much the same thing as uploading it to Gemini, right? Which
Yeah.
and everything lives within that ecosystem. I think a big issue right now, not only within the legal industry, but I think especially in the legal industry, with all this legal AI vendors coming into the market and SaaS platforms, many experience shiny object syndrome, essentially, always being distracted by the next big thing, by the next cool tool that is being released. How do you decide which AI tools to invest in and which to avoid and not get distracted by the shiny object syndrome?
Well, I think that's a great point. Let me bring up one more thing that we are doing. You asked about intake, you asked about AI. We're using a tool from a company called Drive Marketing called Speed AI,
Okay.
and that syncs with our Ring Central, it syncs with our call rail, and we're getting, as close to real-time analysis of inbound calls. And so that to me has been really cool to just watch how it looks at the um, the performance of our team members. And again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but if it can scrutinize all the calls and we could only scrutinize 20, then aren't we better than we were? We can always go drill down into the ones that we think are worthwhile, but now it's just another tool to support the effort. So let me answer now your current question. Shiny object syndrome. That's where I think I've learned to slow down. not in bringing on new cases, but bringing on new tools because you don't want to overwhelm your team. You don't want to get in with something that you can't get out of and you realize isn't great. So, to the extent that somebody will let you do something on a trial or they don't lock you in on a long contract and you can give it a shot, go give it a shot. But the last thing you want to do is, take on this practice management tool and all of a sudden, because you think they have the best AI, and all of a sudden the AI turns out to be crap and you're stuck in a term and you're like, oh man, I really wish I wasn't here. So again, take a couple seconds, take a breath, and hopefully see if it's the right fit for you.
And I feel like the situation changes so quickly with AI. Like 6 months feels like an eternity. It is really in your best interest to not lock yourself into a 3-year contract, right? And make sure even if you're paying a bit more, you still retain the flexibility to switch because that may be a competitive advantage, 12 months down the line.
Yeah, I agree. And some of these folks, they want every user in your firm, every person in your firm to have a license or everybody to do this. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If my firm is segmented and someone doesn't need it, why would I want to do that? So in a lot of these firms, because they're maybe starting out, they'll be more flexible with you. You can ask for things you might not be able to get otherwise, because a lot of them are just trying to get market share. And because they want to be the one that comes out on top when the dust finally settles. So again, not afraid to ask, don't be polite, get rude,
Get
that
rude.
kind of thing.
No,
That's it.
absolutely. No, and I loved as well the mention of Speed AI. Recently as well had a look at the tool. The great thing as well, it has like this lead rescue portion which identifies potential leads that may have been disqualified incorrectly, or where there's some chance that still those can be closed. I think that's quite useful as well.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
So Lee, we have talked about marketing, branding, intake, your story, operations, AI, the connection of AI and being a secretary sitting outside of the office. I'm actually going to steal that one. One final question before we wrap things up. Looking ahead, what's your next big challenge that you are facing and you're trying to overcome?
Yeah, I think where we are now as a firm is having to make the decision of where do we go next in this, and I mean that literally, right? Like we are in the New Orleans area. The question becomes like, how deep do we try to penetrate that market? How much more investing do we do? Or do we say, no, we're happy with what we're generating in this part of the state? Do we pivot over to where my COO is in Texas? Do we look to open a branch of the firm somewhere else in the state? What makes the most sense? And does it matter, right? In a world that is increasingly virtual, does it matter if you have an office in a certain metro? Maybe for Google business purposes, to have a profile to get on the map, maybe. So that's kind of the strategy behind what we're doing. And we've been doing some stuff on social media that's working quite well. We've got stuff up on YouTube. You've seen my LinkedIn posts. We're just trying to continue to build the brand, so that people recognize us outside of our small universe. And again, just keep trying to help people, because the more people we help, they'll tell their friends and their neighbors, and that'll just help us grow.
Makes sense. And just a small tip regarding the Google Maps listings. I mean, nothing's stopping you as well from getting like a small office for $500 a month.
Oh, I know.
And in that is a location,
Yeah.
it's still, satisfies all terms of service. So why not?
I agree. I agree. The only problem is they're like, hey, I want to go meet you at your Shreveport office. And I'm like, I don't really want to drive 5 hours to meet you. Can we do it on Zoom? So I just want to
Yeah,
tread
it's
lightly.
uncomfortable conversation, right? Well, okay, Lee, thank you so much for being and having this conversation with me today. Um, how can people reach out to you and to your firm? What's the best methods?
Sure. Like I said before, we're trying to idiot proof it. So if you want to find us, getrude.com. Our toll-free number for those of you with your rotary phones at home, 833 get rude, which is 833-438-7833. If you're interested in some entertainment, you can find us on all social channels on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We are at Get Rude Law. And I do some silly stuff, and you'll learn a couple things too. So come find us.
Love it. Thank you very much for your time, Lee.
Thanks, Martin. Appreciate you.